In the heart of the Jackson, Mississippi, the Phillips family was a respected black Southern household known for their tight-knit values, Sunday dinners and fierce loyalty. They were the perfect family admired by everyone, their lives a picture of success and devotion. Tavares, a beloved youth pastor, and his beautiful wife Denitra, the epitome of grace and warmth. Together, they had a life that seemed to shine brighter than most. But what if everything you thought you knew about them was a lie? Behind closed doors, a secret festered. A betrayal so dark that when it came to light, nothing could ever be the same again. It all started with a bond between Tavares and his brother-in-law. A bond that grew far too intimate for comfort. For years, the truth simmered beneath the surface, hidden behind their perfect family portrait. And one night, in the stillness of their home, what was supposed to be an honest moment of truth, became a violent explosion. The words that were exchanged in that moment would alter everything. What followed was a confrontation that ended with a scream that shattered the silence, and left a life hanging by a thread. How does a family built on love and trust fall apart in an instant? What happens when the truth comes crashing down, and everything you fought to protect is destroyed by the lies you've told? This isn't just a story of murder. It's the unraveling of a life. A family. A love. Before we dive into this chilling case, like this video and subscribe for more tales of love, lies, and betrayal. The Phillips family was the kind of family people in Jackson, Mississippi, looked up to. Picture perfect, God-fearing, and bound together by love, tradition, and faith. At the center of it all was Tavares Phillips, the golden boy. A rising youth pastor at one of the city's most influential black megachurches, he had a magnetic presence in the pulpit and a pristine image outside of it. He preached to packed pews every Sunday, captivating hearts with his words, his passion, and his promise. He was admired by his congregation, respected by elders, and envied by many. Tavares had married his high school sweetheart, Denitra, a poised, elegant woman who seemed tailor-made for the role of a pastor's wife. She carried herself with grace, always dressed to perfection, and raised their two young boys with a soft but steady hand. Together, they were admired as the ultimate power couple in their community, young, God-centered, and inspiring. To outsiders, their love was a fairy tale. A beautiful family grounded in faith. A home filled with laughter, discipline, and unwavering devotion. But beneath the surface of that shining image was something no one could have imagined. Denitra's older brother, Cordelis "Cord" Mays, had also married into the family. Loud, funny, and full of charm, Cord was the kind of man who made his presence known the moment he entered a room. He had a big smile, a contagious laugh, and a sense of humor that could cut through any awkward silence. But behind all that energy, there was something a little harder to pin down. A glint of something darker that only showed itself in fleeting moments. Cord was married to Tavares' sister, Marshall. Marshall was no-nonsense, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective of her peace. A seasoned nurse with a short fuse and a sixth sense for bullshit, she kept a tight ship and didn't play when it came to her family. But like everyone else, even she never saw it coming. The relationships within the family were layered, two sets of siblings married into each other. On paper, it was tight-knit, interwoven, and strong. Sunday dinners were loud and joyful. Church services were a family affair. Holiday gatherings were filled with laughter, gospel music, and endless trays of food. They were the Southern ideal, the kind of family people pointed to when talking about love, unity, and generational strength. And yet, there was always something a little too close between Cord and Tavares. The kind of closeness that felt just a beat off. They took trips together without their spouses. Disappeared for hours during family functions. Always had private jokes and conversations that nobody else seemed to understand. It was subtle enough to ignore. But once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. The community loved the Phillips family. They were seen as model citizens, the embodiment of black Southern success. Tavares with his powerful sermons and polished presence. Denitra with her elegance and quiet influence. Cord with his charm, and Marshall with her discipline. From the outside, it was perfection. A living, breathing example of what faith and family could look like. But behind the polished photos and church smiles, there was a secret. A devastating, forbidden truth hiding in plain sight. A truth so dark, it would not only destroy their picture-perfect life but end it. They say some secrets are like rot, they start small, barely noticeable, hidden under the surface. But over time, they spread. Quietly. Relentlessly. Until everything around them begins to decay. For Tavares Phillips and Cord Mays, their secret was already years in the making. What started as a bond between in-laws, two men brought together by marriage, had twisted into something far more dangerous. Over the past 2 years, their connection had deepened in ways that blurred every boundary of loyalty, marriage, and morality. To the rest of the family, Tavares and Cord were just close. They took guys' trips regularly, getaways to New Orleans, Houston, Atlanta. Places where nobody knew their names and they could slip off the radar for a few days. They returned with matching stories, inside jokes, and that certain look in their eyes, like they had just come back from somewhere no one else had been. Family chalked it up to friendship. Brotherhood. Camaraderie. After all, men needed time to unwind too, right? But Denitra, she saw more. She noticed how Cord's eyes would follow Tavares across the room. How their conversations would dip into hushed tones, how they'd always find a way to be alone, even at family functions. She noticed the touches. Small. Lingering. A hand on the back that didn't move fast enough. A laugh that felt too intimate. At first, she tried to brush it off. It was her husband. It was her brother. What would she even be accusing them of? But suspicion doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It festers. Denitra started keeping her distance, watching instead of speaking. She didn't have proof. Only a gut feeling, a woman's intuition that something in her home was rotting from the inside out. But the more she watched, the harder it became to lie to herself. This wasn't paranoia. Something was happening. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the truth was far darker than any suspicion she could have dreamed up. Tavares and Cord weren't just having an affair. They were in love. Secretly. Deeply. Obsessively. And they had been for years. Long before Marshall said, "I do." Long before Denitra ever imagined that the man she married, the father of her children, was living a double life. Their affair wasn't casual. It was consuming. They talked constantly. Texted in code. They used work trips and church retreats to disappear together. They even had a secret shared bank account, money quietly set aside for some imagined future that could never exist. A future without wives. Without judgment. Just the two of them, finally free. But freedom came with a price. Because the deeper they fell, the heavier the lie became. Tavares was unraveling. Every Sunday, he stood at the pulpit and preached about righteousness, about sin, about marriage and faithfulness. He spoke of salvation while knowing damn well he was living in shadows. The weight of it was suffocating. He told Cord he felt like he was being torn in half, one side the perfect pastor, the other consumed by a love that could never be made public. Cord, on the other hand, was reckless. He didn't care about appearances. He wanted more. More time. More freedom. More of Tavares. And as their desire intensified, so did their frustration. The wives were in the way. The lie had gone on too long. And the fantasy of escaping it all started to take shape in the most twisted way imaginable. They began talking in whispers. What if the wives weren't in the picture? What if they just disappeared? It started as a joke. A what if. But every time they came back to it, it felt less like fantasy and more like planning. They weren't just hiding a secret. They were building a nightmare. One that was about to rip through everything in its path. And in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, they made a choice. Not to confess. Not to end it. But to protect their secret at any cost. Everything unraveled on a humid June evening in 2023. Marshall Phillips had just finished a double shift at the hospital. 14 hours on her feet, sore ankles, and an aching head. She wasn't even supposed to be home that early, but she traded with a coworker last minute. All she wanted was to charge her phone and maybe get off her feet. She came in quietly, not expecting much. The house was still. The lights were dim. She made her way to the guest bedroom, Cord's makeshift office. He said it helped him focus to work in there when he was home. Marshall didn't think twice about it. But the door was cracked, and she heard something. A sound that didn't belong. As she stepped closer, she saw through the sliver of space what she was never supposed to see. Cord and Tavares, naked, tangled, moaning. There was no mistaking it. No, maybe I misread it. No confusion. Just bare skin, urgent hands, the kind of intimacy that only comes from something long-running and well-rehearsed. Marshall didn't say a word. She didn't barge in. She didn't shout or ask questions. She didn't even flinch. She simply pulled out her phone, recorded exactly 60 seconds, then turned around and walked out. She didn't cry that night. She didn't tell a soul. What she did was start collecting. Quietly. Meticulously. She sat on the secret for 17 days, studying her husband like he was a patient under observation. Every night, once Cord was asleep, she went through his phone. She learned how he saved things, how he archived texts and voice memos in hidden apps. How he renamed photos under false file extensions. But nothing he did was enough. She found it all. Texts between him and Tavares going back years. Photos. Voicemails. Plans. Conversations. They had been sleeping together for 5 years, long before Cord ever proposed to her. The affair wasn't new. It was established. It was central. And the worst part? It wasn't just about lust or forbidden love. It was about control. Strategy. They had a plan. They talked about their wives like accessories. Like necessary props to uphold the images they portrayed, Cord, the charismatic husband, Tavares, the devoted pastor and family man. There were messages where they laughed about how gullible Denitra was. Others where they fantasized about how much easier life would be if the women weren't in the way. In one voice memo, Cord said he couldn't stand another year of pretending. In another, Tavares whispered that he'd rather be hated than hidden forever. They didn't just fall in love behind their wives' backs. They built an entire narrative, a world that required Denitra and Marshall to stay quiet, oblivious, or gone. Marshall forwarded everything to herself. Every text. Every file. She sent them to a private email account under a fake name. She backed it up to a hard drive she kept in her locker at work. She wasn't just documenting betrayal. She was building a case. Because she knew once she confronted them, nothing would be the same again. She didn't know what her next move would be. But she knew one thing with complete certainty: this wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about survival. The final straw came late one night as Marshall sat in the living room, alone, scrolling through Cord's phone for the 100th time. She wasn't sure what she was looking for anymore: proof, maybe, or some kind of confession. What she found instead was a voice memo she hadn't noticed before. It was quiet, the sound of Tavares' voice barely above a whisper. "She's starting to suspect," he said. The tone was calm, measured, like he was talking to himself. "I might have to handle it." Marshall sat up straight. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She just listened again. And again. Then she sent the memo to herself, labeled it with the date, and added it to the growing file of evidence she had been collecting. But this time, something felt different. This wasn't just a secret. It was a warning. 2 nights later, Denitra Phillips was dead. She was found slumped over the steering wheel of her SUV in the garage of their family home. The engine was still running. Her 2 sons were asleep inside the house, unharmed. Police were called just after midnight. They ruled it an accident almost immediately, carbon monoxide poisoning. They said maybe she had been tired. Maybe she went out to grab something and sat in the car too long. Maybe she was distracted. Marshall knew better. Denitra didn't make careless mistakes. She didn't, accidentally, sit in a running car until she died. And she certainly wasn't the kind of woman to leave her children sleeping in the house while she dozed off in the garage. None of it made sense, unless you knew what Marshall knew. Unless you had listened to that voice memo. She's starting to suspect. I might have to handle it. Marshall waited exactly 1 day. Then she went to the police. She didn't hold back. She gave them everything. The video of Cord and Tavares in bed. The 5 years' worth of messages, the voice memos, the texts where they talked about keeping their wives as cover. The one where Cord said he wished these women would disappear. She gave them the last recording, Tavares plotting something that sounded dangerously like premeditation. When the detectives finished listening, the room was silent. It didn't feel like just another domestic tragedy. It felt like something deeper. Colder. Calculated. The case blew open like a bomb. The news spread like wildfire. By the time the police issued arrest warrants for both Tavares Phillips and Cordelis Mays, the story had already exploded across Mississippi, and then across the country. What started as a quiet investigation into a suspicious death had turned into a full-blown media circus. The headlines were relentless: *Youth pastor arrested in wife's mysterious death. Secret gay affair behind church tragedy. Brother-in-laws or lovers, *. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But no one was prepared for what happened next. Tavares was arrested on a Sunday morning, in the middle of his sermon. He stood at the pulpit, Bible in one hand, microphone in the other, preaching about forgiveness and divine purpose when uniformed officers entered the sanctuary. Gasps echoed through the pews as the congregation turned to see 2 detectives walk calmly toward the stage. He barely finished his sentence when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The church went silent. Shocked parishioners watched their beloved pastor, a man they had trusted, followed, prayed with, led down the aisle in handcuffs and escorted out the door. Some people cried. Others turned away. A few shouted out in disbelief. It was the kind of moment people don't forget. 2 days later, Cord turned himself in. But not before he tried to escape. He packed a bag, drained his personal savings account, and drove east, hoping, maybe, to disappear into Florida. But the police were already watching. He didn't get far. The arrest was quiet. No cameras. No church. Just a gas station outside Tallahassee, and a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. By then, the story had taken on a life of its own. The public was deeply divided. Some people saw Tavares as the mastermind, a manipulator who had used his position of power to seduce Cord, to string him along, to conspire and ultimately kill to keep their secret safe. Others saw Cord as the true villain, a man who let lust and ego destroy 2 families and stood by while his own sister-in-law was murdered. And then there were those who pointed fingers at Marshall. They asked why she stayed silent for 17 days. Why she didn't confront them sooner. Why she let it go so far. But most people didn't know the full weight she had carried. What it meant to find your husband in bed with your brother-in-law. What it did to a woman's sense of reality. There were no easy answers. No clean sides to pick. Meanwhile, Denitra's friends and followers mourned deeply. She had been a role model to many, quiet strength wrapped in elegance and grace. Social media flooded with tributes, old photos, and messages of heartbreak. People remembered her not as a victim, but as a woman who deserved more. The question on everyone's mind wasn't just about guilt. It was about why. Was this a crime of passion? A desperate attempt to keep a secret love alive? Or something even darker, a betrayal of family, faith, and everything sacred? The firestorm wasn't just about the murder. It was about everything that surrounded it, the masks people wear, the lies they live, and what happens when all of it comes crashing down in the most public, painful way possible. The trial was nothing short of explosive. It began in late October of 2023, just 4 months after Denitra Phillips' death, but by then the courtroom was already infamous. Lines stretched down the block every morning as neighbors, reporters, and former church members all showed up to witness the unmasking of a man they once called pastor. Some brought Bibles. Others brought protest signs. Most just came to see what truth could possibly explain the horror. The prosecution wasted no time. They laid out the plan with chilling clarity. Tavares had lured Denitra into the garage late at night, telling her he needed her help fixing her tail light before their Sunday trip. She followed him, unaware she was walking into a death trap. Once inside, he sealed the garage door from the outside, got into the driver's seat, and rigged the ignition so the engine would run without her foot on the pedal. Exhaust poured in while he stood outside, waiting. The courtroom gasped when the prosecution played a voice memo found in Cord's phone. Tavares whispered, "She's starting to suspect. If I don't handle it now, she'll ruin everything." And the texts, my God, the texts. Cord, from hundreds of miles away, sent message after message that night. "You got this. Be quick. Let me know when it's done." Then, finally, just 3 words that landed like a bullet in the courtroom. "Get it done." Cord's defense team scrambled to gain sympathy. They painted him as a broken man, emotionally abused, manipulated, brainwashed by Tavares' charisma and religious authority. They said Tavares preyed on Cord's insecurities, wrapped his desires in scripture, and turned him against his own wife, his own sister. They said Cord was in love, not evil. But then came the recordings. In one audio clip, Cord could be heard laughing, saying, "Once these bitches gone, we can finally breathe. We'll be free." There was no coming back from that. The jury didn't deliberate long. Tavares Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read, no apology, no tears, just the same blank stare he'd worn throughout. Had been served. But the damage was irreversible. Marshall filed for divorce while Cord was still awaiting sentencing. There was no drama. No press conference. Just paperwork and a quiet goodbye. She sold the family home and relocated to Denver with her 2 children. She changed their last names and severed all ties to the Phillips family, including her brother, Tavares. She hasn't spoken publicly since. Denitra's parents declined all interview requests, choosing instead to mourn in private. But one voice did speak for the family, Grandma Letha. In a rare interview with Southern Crime Watch, she sat in a worn armchair, holding Denitra's wedding photo in her lap, her voice trembling with grief. "My grandson preached about sin every Sunday," she said. "But he slept in the devil's bed every night. And now he's right where he belongs." That one line haunted viewers across the country. This wasn't just a murder. It was a betrayal so deep it left an entire community shaken. A man of God who weaponized faith to cover his secrets. A family destroyed by lies. And a woman who paid the ultimate price for loving the wrong man. The search for justice ended in a courtroom. But for the people who lived through it, the healing is still far from over. This tragedy reveals just how powerful, and dangerous, secrets can be. Hidden in the darkest corners of a picture-perfect life, they grew like rot beneath polished surfaces, until everything crumbled. Denitra Phillips was a mother, a wife, a woman devoted to her family. And she paid the ultimate price for the lies spun by the very men she trusted most. What unfolded wasn't just a love triangle, it was a chain reaction of betrayal, manipulation, and silence that turned deadly. A woman lost her life. 2 children lost their mother. A church lost its leader. And a family, once the pride of their community, was shattered beyond repair. It's a chilling reminder that no matter how perfect something looks on the outside, the truth always finds a way to the surface. And when it does, it can destroy everything in its path. Could this tragedy have been avoided if the truth had come out sooner? What would have happened if someone had spoken up before it was too late? How many lives could be saved if we learned to meet love with honesty instead of fear, if we chose truth over deception? If this story shocked you, like and subscribe for more chilling tales of deception, betrayal, and murder.